The night is dark and full of theories.
What if Albus Dumbledore had made a different choice on the night of November 1st, 1981? What if, instead of leaving baby Harry on the Dursleys' doorstep with nothing but a letter, he'd looked at that orphaned child and decided that blood protection wasn't worth condemning the boy who lived to 10 years of neglect and abuse? What if the greatest wizard of the age had chosen to raise Harry Potter himself, taking personal responsibility for the child whose survival had just changed the entire wizarding world? It seems like such a radical departure from Dumbledore's canonical choices. The man who always played the long game, who sacrificed personal connection for strategic necessity, who believed that Harry needed to grow up away from fame and adulation to develop properly. The man who sent Harry to the Dursleys specifically because he believed the protection of Lily's blood sacrifice and the humility of a mundane childhood would serve Harry better than anything magic could provide. But what if Dumbledore had been wrong? What if, standing on Privet Drive that November night, he'd realized that his carefully constructed plan had a fatal flaw, that condemning an innocent child to loveless guardians who would despise him was a price too high to pay for blood protection that might never even be needed? Today we're exploring the timeline where Albus Dumbledore makes a different choice, where he takes Harry Potter home to Hogwarts Castle and raises him personally, where the boy who lived grows up in the Headmaster's tower, learning magic from the greatest wizard alive, surrounded by the very school his parents had loved. This isn't a simple story of Harry having an easier childhood. Dumbledore as a parental figure brings its own massive complications. He's a brilliant strategist but emotionally distant in many ways. He's kind but fundamentally manipulative. He loves deeply but often from a carefully measured distance. He's devoted his entire life to the greater good, sometimes at the direct expense of individual happiness. And he carries secrets and profound trauma that would inevitably shape how he raises a child. Dumbledore also has enormous responsibilities beyond childcare. He's headmaster of Hogwarts, chief warlock of the Wizengamot, supreme mugwump of the International Confederation of Wizards. He's managing the complex reconstruction of post-war magical Britain while actively hunting remaining Death Eaters and constantly monitoring for any signs of Voldemort's potential return. He doesn't have unlimited time to be a full-time parent to an infant, but he has significant resources that most guardians lack. An entire castle full of extraordinarily competent witches and wizards who could help raise Harry. House elves to handle practical daily needs. Minerva McGonagall to provide stern but deeply loving discipline. Phileas Flitwick to teach with patience and genuine precision. Pomona Sprout to offer nurturing care. Hagrid to provide uncomplicated affection and infectious wonder at magical creatures. A complete community that could collectively raise the orphan son of James and Lily Potter. So how would this work practically in day-to-day terms? Harry would grow up physically in Hogwarts Castle, probably in specially prepared quarters connected directly to Dumbledore's office. He'd be raised by what amounts to an entire village. Dumbledore as primary guardian and ultimate authority, but with absolutely significant help from the dedicated staff. He'd grow up completely immersed in magic from literal birth, learning spells and complex theory years before his eventual peers. He'd be educated personally by the absolute best teachers in Britain on subjects far beyond what normal magical children ever studied. But he'd also grow up profoundly isolated from other children his own age. Desperately lonely in a castle, perpetually full of teenagers and adults who weren't his actual peers. Strange and fundamentally different in ways that Canon Harry never experienced. Academically brilliant and magically powerful, but possibly severely lacking in crucial social skills and emotional intelligence. Advanced far beyond his years intellectually, but potentially stunted in other essential areas of normal childhood development. And critically important, he'd grow up gradually knowing Dumbledore's deepest secrets. Not immediately, not revealed all at once, but slowly accumulated over years of close proximity and careful observation. He'd eventually see Dumbledore's strategic manipulations clearly, his calculated sacrifices, his consistent willingness to use people as pieces on an elaborate chessboard for the abstract greater good. He'd learn through direct experience that even the greatest heroes carry profound darkness, and that seemingly good intentions don't always justify questionable methods. We'll explore in detail how Dumbledore handles the immense practical challenges of raising a child, while simultaneously managing his various demanding responsibilities. How he struggles to balance genuine affection with strategic emotional distance. How he makes difficult decisions about what to tell Harry about his parents, about the prophecy hanging over them, about Voldemort and Horcruxes and the terrible destiny that awaits. We'll examine carefully what kind of person Harry becomes when raised directly by Dumbledore from infancy. Does he naturally inherit Dumbledore's strategic thinking and subtle manipulation? His profound love of knowledge and genuinely complex magic? His consistent tendency towards secrecy and playing cards extremely close to the chest? Or does he eventually rebel against these specific traits, consciously becoming something entirely different? We'll follow Harry chronologically through his eventual Hogwarts years, which become dramatically different when he's already lived in the castle for a complete decade. When he knows absolutely every secret passage and has already learned most of the standard curriculum. When the staff members are his extended family rather than distant authority figures. When Dumbledore is his guardian sitting watchfully at the staff table, rather than a mysterious headmaster he barely knows. And we'll explore the central moral tension. Can Dumbledore successfully raise Harry without inevitably turning him into a weapon? Can he genuinely love this child while knowing with certainty that Harry is prophesied to either kill Voldemort or die trying? Can he simultaneously be a proper father figure and a cold strategist, or will one role inevitably corrupt and destroy the other? This alternate timeline isn't necessarily objectively better than canon. Dumbledore raising Harry directly solves numerous problems, but creates entirely new ones. Harry gains immense knowledge and magical power, but potentially loses crucial normalcy and actual childhood. He's meticulously protected and brilliantly educated, but also severely isolated and burdened with crushing expectations. He grows up genuinely loved, but also systematically used, deeply cherished, but also carefully prepared for ultimate sacrifice. The fundamental question isn't whether Dumbledore can raise Harry absolutely perfectly. It's whether this particular kind of imperfect upbringing produces a Harry Potter truly capable of defeating Voldemort while retaining enough fundamental humanity to actually want to. Whether growing up entirely in Dumbledore's considerable shadow creates a genuine hero, or just another brilliant, strategically damaged manipulator, willing to sacrifice absolutely anything for the greater good. So let's explore the complete timeline where Albus Dumbledore chooses direct responsibility over abstract strategy, where the boy who lived grows up in Hogwarts Castle, learning constantly from the greatest wizard of the age, where prophecy and childhood and destiny collide repeatedly in the Headmaster's tower, shaping a completely different Harry Potter. The choice, November 1st, 1981. Albus Dumbledore stood on Privet Drive at precisely midnight, baby Harry Potter sleeping peacefully in Hagrid's massive arms, and felt the overwhelming weight of impossible choices pressing down on his ancient shoulders like a physical burden he could barely support. The plan was absolutely clear in his mind, had been for weeks. Leave Harry with the Dursleys. Let Petunia's blood connection to her sister Lily activate the ancient protection charm that would shield Harry from Voldemort's followers. Keep Harry completely safe from vengeful Death Eaters, and carefully hidden from corrupting fame until he was old enough to handle both responsibly. Give him a normal, humble childhood far away from the magical world's crushing expectations and potentially damaging adulation. It was unquestionably the strategic choice from every angle Dumbledore had considered. The smart choice from a purely tactical perspective. The choice that prioritized Harry's long-term survival and healthy development over his short-term happiness and immediate comfort. Dumbledore had made such calculated choices many times before throughout his extraordinarily long life. During Grindelwald's terrible rise to power across Europe, he deliberately sacrificed important friendships and romantic love for the abstract greater good. During Voldemort's brutal First War, he'd knowingly sent people into mortal danger, fully understanding that some wouldn't return alive, that their deaths would weigh on his conscience forever. He was thoroughly accustomed to making genuinely hard decisions that caused immediate pain in the present, but served much larger purposes in the uncertain long term. But standing there on that ordinary Muggle street, looking directly at Petunia Dursley's house, with its obsessively neat garden and firmly closed curtains that seemed to shut out the entire world, Dumbledore felt something he rarely allowed himself to experience: profound, gut-wrenching doubt about whether he was making the right choice. He'd visited this specific house before on careful reconnaissance missions, had personally observed Petunia and her husband Vernon Dursley in their natural environment, had seen their cramped, fearful worldview that rejected anything outside their narrow definition of normal, their obvious terror of anything remotely unusual or different, their desperate, almost pathological desire for absolute normality at any cost to themselves or others. Had watched them excessively coddle their son Dudley while treating anything they considered abnormal with visible contempt and barely disguised disgust. Lily had told him explicitly years ago, back when she and James were making careful arrangements for Harry's potential care in case something terrible happened to them. That Petunia actively despised magic and everything associated with the magical world. That the sisters had been painfully estranged since Lily went to Hogwarts at 11 and discovered she was a witch. That Petunia would absolutely not be a suitable guardian for a magical child under any circumstances. That she would make the child's life miserable. If anything ever happens to us, Lily had said with terrible prescience that haunted Dumbledore now. Promise me Harry won't go to Petunia. Promise me you'll find someone who will love him for exactly what he is, not despise him for it. Promise me, Albus. Dumbledore had promised sincerely at the time, had meant it completely. Then Lily and James had made Sirius Black their secret keeper. Or so absolutely everyone believed until Black's shocking betrayal became public knowledge, and Peter Pettigrew's heroic murder. Now Sirius was a wanted murderer, hiding somewhere in the world. Peter Pettigrew was tragically dead along with 12 innocent muggles, and Remus Lupin was severely compromised by both his werewolf status and overwhelming grief over losing all his friends. The Dursleys were the only blood relatives remaining who could activate the protection, the only viable option for ensuring that the blood protection worked properly to keep Harry completely safe from Death Eaters seeking revenge for their fallen master. Except Dumbledore was looking directly at that house with growing horror, and realizing with absolute clarity that the magical protection wasn't worth the terrible emotional and psychological price Harry would pay. Harry would survive the Death Eaters and any other external physical threats, but suffer something potentially much worse. Years of systematic emotional neglect and psychological abuse from people who would hate everything he fundamentally represented. He would grow up unloved, actively unwanted, emotionally damaged in profound ways that no amount of later care could fully heal or repair. Albus? Minerva McGonagall said quietly, deep concern evident in her voice. She'd been watching him hesitate uncharacteristically for several long minutes now, understanding that something was deeply wrong with the carefully laid plan. I cannot do it, Dumbledore said softly, his voice carrying absolute conviction despite its quiet tone. I cannot leave him here with these people. The blood protection, Minerva began, will keep him safe from external threats while systematically destroying him from within. Dumbledore interrupted firmly, his mind made up. Minerva, I have watched the Dursleys carefully over weeks of observation. I have seen how they live, how they think, what they value. They will make this innocent child's life absolutely miserable. They will treat him as an unwanted burden and a source of deep shame. He will grow up knowing with certainty that he is fundamentally unwanted and unloved by the only family he has. Then where will you take him? Minerva asked practically. Who else can possibly provide the protection he desperately needs from those who would harm him? Dumbledore looked down at Harry, still sleeping peacefully, despite the monumental decisions being made about his entire future. The lightning bolt scar on his small forehead was already healing over, the wound closing, though it would always mark him permanently as the boy who lived. This child who had impossibly survived the killing curse through his mother's sacrifice, who had somehow destroyed the Dark Lord Voldemort when the curse rebounded, who was destined, according to Sybil Trelawney's prophecy that only Dumbledore knew in full, to face Voldemort again in final confrontation. This precious child who deserved so much better than being abandoned on a doorstep like an unwanted package, left for people who would despise his very existence. I will take him, Dumbledore said with absolute finality. Minerva's eyes widened dramatically behind her square spectacles. You, Albus, your headmaster of Hogwarts, you have enormous responsibilities, countless obligations to the school and the magical community. You cannot simply raise a child while managing everything else on your plate. I can, and I absolutely will, Dumbledore said firmly. Hogwarts has house elves to help with practical daily matters like feeding and clothing. The staff can assist significantly with supervision and education. You yourself, Felius, Pomona, even Severus, despite his grief. And I will not abandon James and Lily's son to people who will despise him for existing, who will crush his spirit before he's old enough to defend himself. What about the blood protection? That's genuine, powerful magic that could save his life. Dad, I will find other ways to protect him adequately. Wards layered upon wards, guardians watching constantly, magical defenses that don't require him to suffer. Hogwarts itself is already the safest place in all of Britain, arguably in all of Europe. I will make it safer still specifically for Harry. Will dedicate resources to ensuring no harm comes to him. The boy will grow up knowing he's special, knowing he defeated Voldemort as an infant. That kind of fame could damage him in completely different ways than neglect would. Perhaps it could, Dumbledore acknowledged. But I genuinely believe being loved and wanted, even imperfectly, is fundamentally better than being rejected and systematically neglected for his entire childhood. I will do my absolute best to give him as normal a childhood as circumstances possibly allow, to shield him from excessive fame, to let him be a child rather than a celebrity. Dumbledore held out his arms expectantly. Hagrid transferred Harry carefully, the baby stirring slightly but not fully waking from his magically induced sleep. Dumbledore looked down at the small, peaceful face, so remarkably similar to James Potter but with Lily's distinctive, brilliant green eyes, and felt something profound shift in his ancient, carefully guarded heart. He had failed Ariana, his beloved younger sister, through tragic negligence and the misguided pursuit of greater goals with Grindelwald, had failed Grindelwald himself through love that fatally clouded his judgment and nearly destroyed the world, had failed countless others throughout the long years, through strategic choices that ruthlessly prioritized abstract outcomes over individual human beings and their suffering. He would not fail Harry Potter. Not this child, not James and Lily's son, not the boy who had already sacrificed so much without knowing it. Come, he said firmly to Minerva and Hagrid. We return immediately to Hogwarts. There is much to prepare if I'm to raise a child properly. They left Privet Drive without leaving the carefully written letter or the sleeping child. The Dursleys would never know how close they'd come to receiving their magical nephew, would never understand what they'd been spared, and Harry Potter's entire life would unfold on a completely different path than destiny had seemingly intended, shaped by the man who chose love over strategy for perhaps the first time in decades. Early childhood at Hogwarts, ages 0 to 5. The first several months with baby Harry were genuinely challenging in ways that Dumbledore, despite all his wisdom and magical power, hadn't fully anticipated or prepared for. He was over 150 years old, long past the age when most wizards seriously considered raising infants from scratch. He had enormous responsibilities that constantly demanded his attention and careful management. Hogwarts to run smoothly, with hundreds of students, ministry politics to navigate carefully during the post-war reconstruction, Death Eater trials to testify at as a key witness, the complex rebuilding of magical Britain's shattered institutions to personally oversee, but he also had a baby who needed constant care, attention, and love every single day. Practical daily matters were handled primarily by the Hogwarts house elves, who took to the task with characteristic enthusiasm. A young elf named Dobby, not yet enslaved to the cruel Malfoy family, still free and working at Hogwarts, became Harry's primary caretaker for immediate daily needs, feeding, changing, bathing, the endless, exhausting cycle of infant care that never seemed to stop. The elf was remarkably devoted and genuinely competent, treating Harry with sincere affection and taking his responsibilities seriously. But Dumbledore insisted absolutely on being personally involved, beyond just delegation to the elves. He made time every single morning and evening to spend directly with Harry, regardless of other pressing obligations. Fed him bottles while reading aloud from magical texts in a soothing voice. Played with him in the headmaster's office while simultaneously doing necessary paperwork, letting Harry grasp his beard and laugh. Took him on walks through the castle grounds in a specially charmed, magically warmed sling that kept the baby comfortable in any weather. Minerva McGonagall became an unofficial godmother almost immediately, stepping naturally into the role. She was characteristically stern but deeply caring underneath that strict exterior, holding Harry during staff meetings when Dumbledore needed both hands free, teaching him nursery rhymes with her distinctive Scottish burr, knitting him tiny Gryffindor scarves despite Dumbledore's gentle teasing about house favoritism. She provided the structured discipline and practical childcare knowledge that Dumbledore sometimes lacked. Rubeus Hagrid visited constantly from his hut on the grounds, bringing age-appropriate toys he'd carved himself and treating Harry like the most precious thing in the entire world. His uncomplicated love and genuine enthusiasm perfectly balanced Dumbledore's more cerebral, philosophical approach to childcare. Harry's first stuffed animal was a dragon Hagrid had sewn, slightly lopsided but made with enormous love. Phileas Flitwick crafted elaborate magical mobiles that taught Harry colors and sounds through gentle enchantments, the tiny professor spending hours ensuring they were both educational and entertaining. Pomona Sprout grew special, responsive flowers in the greenhouse that bloomed and sang when they detected baby laughter, bringing them to Dumbledore's office to brighten Harry's nursery. Even Severus Snape, still raw with complicated grief over Lily's death, contributed reluctantly by brewing gentle healing potions and effective sleeping draughts when Harry was ill or particularly fussy, though he could barely stand to look at the child who had Lily's eyes. Harry's first word, spoken at 13 months, was Albus, which absolutely delighted Dumbledore and slightly scandalized Minerva, who thought it inappropriate for a baby to call his guardian by his first name. His second word was Minnie, which scandalized her significantly further, while making Dumbledore laugh with genuine amusement at her discomfort. By age 2, Harry was speaking in remarkably full sentences, showing the accelerated development that naturally came from being constantly surrounded by adults using complex language rather than baby talk. Dumbledore told Harry about James and Lily from the very beginning, refusing to let their memory fade or become abstract, showed him photographs preserved in magical albums that moved and laughed, told detailed stories about their time at Hogwarts and their tremendous courage during the war against Voldemort. Harry grew up knowing absolutely that his parents had been brave and loving people, that they died specifically protecting him from evil, that he was cherished both because of them and for himself as an individual. Did they really love me? Harry asked at age 3, looking intently at a moving photograph of Lily holding baby Harry and laughing at something James had said off camera. More than anything in the entire world, Dumbledore assured him gently, kneeling down to Harry's level. They gave their lives for you without a moment's hesitation. That is the deepest, most profound love imaginable, Harry. Never doubt that you were wanted and cherished. Magic manifested remarkably early in Harry, compared to most young wizards, even those from magical families. Accidental magic is completely normal in magical children. All young witches and wizards display it to some degree, but Harry's was particularly strong and frequent and powerful. At age 2, he made a stuffed dragon actually breathe real fire when he got excited playing with it, nearly setting the curtains ablaze. At 3, he levitated books from Dumbledore's high shelves when he wanted to see them but couldn't reach, floating them gently down to his level. At 4, he accidentally vanished his dinner vegetables when Minerva told him firmly to eat them before dessert, much to her exasperation and Dumbledore's hidden amusement. Dumbledore encouraged this natural magic rather than suppressing it the way some traditional pureblood families did out of fear or desire for control. Taught Harry to understand his magic as a natural extension of himself, something to work with cooperatively and understand rather than fear or try to rigidly control through punishment. By age 5, Harry could perform basic wandless magic with reasonable consistency, simple levitation of light objects, creating light in dark rooms, warming charms when he was cold. But Dumbledore also worked diligently hard to give Harry a genuine childhood beyond just magic and books. Took him regularly to Muggle museums and parks in careful disguise, wanting Harry to understand the non-magical world. Read him ordinary children's books alongside magical texts, stories about trains and animals and adventures. Played ordinary games like hide-and-seek through Hogwarts' endless corridors, with Dumbledore sometimes cheating by checking the Marauder's map. Wanted Harry to understand both worlds deeply, to value both magical and mundane equally, to see the worth in all people regardless of their magical ability. The castle became Harry's elaborate playground and home. He knew absolutely every corridor, every convenient shortcut, every secret passage by age 6, having explored thoroughly with childish curiosity. The portraits became his friends, telling him stories and current gossip and occasionally scolding him when he ran too fast in the corridors. The ghosts tolerated him with bemused affection, this living child who had no fear of the dead. Nearly headless Nick became a particular favorite, always willing to demonstrate his nearly severed head for Harry's delighted amusement, though the bloody Baron frightened him. But Harry was also profoundly lonely despite all the adult attention. He had no real peers, no children his own age to play with normally, to fight with, to share childhood experiences with. The castle was constantly full of teenagers and adults, but completely empty of anyone who could truly be his friend and equal. He was precocious and brilliant, but severely socially isolated in ways that concerned both Dumbledore and Minerva. Dumbledore recognized this growing problem and tried to compensate as best he could. Arranged occasional playdates with the Weasley children when Molly visited the castle on business, though the age gaps made it difficult. Bill and Charlie were teenagers. Percy was studious and uncomfortable with young children. The twins were chaotic, invited McGonagall's nieces and nephews for supervised visits during holidays, took Harry to magical communities like Diagon Alley and Hogsmeade, where he could interact with other young wizards briefly, though always under careful watch. It helped somewhat, provided some social interaction, but Harry remained fundamentally different from other children his age. He'd grown up in a castle, learning directly from the greatest wizards alive. He could perform magic that most adults struggled with. He knew things about magical history and complex theory that were normally taught at newt level to 17-year-olds. He was brilliant and strange and isolated by his own exceptional circumstances and upbringing. By age 7, Harry was reading genuinely advanced magical texts and understanding them completely, rather than just looking at pictures. Dumbledore taught him transfiguration theory, and Harry grasped concepts that took older students years to master. The fundamental principles of transformation, the importance of concentration and willpower, the difference between conjuration and transfiguration. They would spend quiet evenings in Dumbledore's office discussing magical philosophy, while Harry drank hot chocolate and Dumbledore sipped tea, talking about ethics and morality and the responsible use of power. "Why do some wizards go dark?" Harry asked once, serious and genuinely curious in the way only children can be. "Because power without wisdom is genuinely dangerous," Dumbledore answered carefully, choosing his words appropriate for a 7-year-old. "And because some people believe the ends justify absolutely any means. They want good things, safety for their families, knowledge and understanding, control over their own lives, but they use terrible methods to achieve them, methods that hurt innocent people." "Like Voldemort?" Harry asked without fear, having heard the name his entire life. Dumbledore flinched slightly at the name spoken so casually by a child. He told Harry about Voldemort at age 6, believing complete honesty was better than mysterious gaps in information that would only generate harmful speculation and fear. Harry had absorbed the information remarkably calmly, understanding that the man who'd killed his parents was evil, but currently destroyed, at least in body. "Yes, exactly like Voldemort," Dumbledore confirmed. "He wanted to conquer death itself and establish pure blood supremacy over all others. Noble goals in some ways. Who wouldn't want to live forever, to protect their community, but twisted into absolutely terrible actions that caused enormous suffering." "Could I go dark?" Harry asked seriously. "Anyone could, potentially," Dumbledore said honestly. "Magic doesn't care about good or evil, it simply is. But I do not believe you will choose darkness, Harry. You have your mother's compassionate heart and your father's moral courage. Those qualities will guide you toward light, even when the path is difficult." These philosophical conversations shaped Harry's moral education more profoundly than any formal instruction possibly could. Dumbledore taught him to question everything, to consider multiple perspectives carefully before making judgments, to understand that good people could make bad choices, and that moral certainty was often dangerously false certainty. He wanted Harry to think rather than just obey, to develop his own moral compass rather than simply following rules. Harry's 8th birthday brought a significant turning point in his magical education. Dumbledore gave him a wand. Not a traditional wand chosen at Ollivanders through the standard process of trying many until one chose the wizard, but one Dumbledore crafted specifically for Harry, using a phoenix feather from Fawkes, his own phoenix companion, and Hollywood from the Hogwarts grounds. It responded to Harry beautifully from the first touch, allowing him to channel magic with genuine precision and control, rather than just raw emotional power. With the wand came much more structured magical education that went beyond theory. Dumbledore began teaching Harry formally and systematically, starting with first-year Hogwarts curriculum, but advancing rapidly based on Harry's exceptional ability and quick understanding. Harry learned charms from Flitwick, who delighted in having such an eager student. Transfiguration from McGonagall, who was strict but fair. Herbology from Sprout, who taught him to respect magical plants. Even Snape contributed reluctantly, teaching Harry basic potions while trying desperately not to see Lily in every gesture and expression, fighting his own complicated feelings. By age 9, Harry could perform magic that most third-year students struggled with significantly. He could transfigure objects reliably and with good precision, cast genuinely advanced charms including some protective spells, brew reasonably complex potions without supervision. Dumbledore worried constantly about pushing him too hard, about stealing his childhood, but Harry absorbed knowledge eagerly, genuinely hungry to understand magic in all its beautiful complexity and power. But social development continued lagging substantially behind intellectual growth, and this concerned Dumbledore deeply. Harry was awkward with people his own age on the rare occasions he encountered them, too serious and knowledgeable to relate easily to normal children. When he attended magical events with other children, like the occasional Hogsmeade Festival or Diagon Alley shopping trip, he struggled to play normally. Other kids wanted to talk about Quidditch and gobstones and chocolate frog cards, while Harry wanted to discuss transfiguration theory and the ethics of certain spells. Am I weird? Harry asked Dumbledore one evening, real concern evident in his young voice. Unusual, Dumbledore corrected gently, sitting down beside Harry. But unusual is absolutely not necessarily bad, Harry. You have gifts many others lack: intelligence, magical power, opportunities for learning. You also face challenges many others never experience: isolation, high expectations, the burden of fame you didn't choose. Both the gifts and the challenges are integral parts of who you are. Will I ever have real friends? Harry asked, and Dumbledore's heart ached at the loneliness in his voice. I genuinely believe so, Dumbledore assured him. When you attend Hogwarts properly as a student rather than living here as my ward, you will find peers who appreciate you for who you truly are. What if they only like me because I'm the boy who lived? Dumbledore paused, thoughtfully. This was the complication he'd feared most. Harry was old enough now to understand his fame, to know he was special in ways that had absolutely nothing to do with his actual qualities as a person, to worry about whether people would like him for himself or for his celebrity. Some may befriend you for the wrong reasons, Dumbledore admitted honestly, believing Harry deserved truth. Others will see past the fame to who you truly are underneath. A bright, kind, thoughtful boy. Learning to distinguish between true friends and false ones is an important part of growing up. It's a skill everyone must develop, though you'll face it in more extreme form. The year Harry turned 10, Dumbledore made a decision that would significantly shape his final year before official Hogwarts attendance. He arranged for Harry to attend lessons with the first-year students as they arrived that September, sitting in on classes as an observer and occasional participant. This let Harry interact with students closer to his age, while also preparing him for the complex social dynamics of school, helping him understand what being a real student rather than the headmaster's ward would be like. It was awkward initially for everyone involved. The first-year students were intimidated by the famous Harry Potter sitting in their classroom, whispering about him constantly. Harry was frustrated by lessons he'd already mastered years ago, bored by material he found too simple. But gradually, genuine connections formed through patience and shared experiences. Harry helped struggling students with homework, explaining concepts in simpler terms than the professors sometimes used. They taught him social skills and normal magical childhood experiences he'd completely missed: how to trade chocolate frog cards, playground games, student gossip, and friendships. One student in particular, Nymphadodor Tonks, a metamorph magus with bright pink hair and infectious energy, became a particular friend despite being several years older. She was irreverent and funny, treating Harry like a normal person rather than a celebrity or the headmaster's special ward. She taught him to prank and laugh and be appropriately childish in ways he'd never learned, ways that Dumbledore's serious nature couldn't teach. "You're weird, Potter," she said cheerfully one day after Harry had explained a complex transfiguration principle. "But good weird. Like me. We weird people have to stick together." It was exactly what Harry needed to hear: acceptance of his differences rather than criticism. By the time Harry's 11th birthday approached and his official Hogwarts letter arrived via owl, a formality since he already lived there, he was as ready as he could be, not for a normal Hogwarts experience that had never been realistically possible given his unique upbringing in the castle itself, but for his own unique journey through the school he'd already lived in for 10 complete years, a journey that would be unlike any other student's in Hogwarts' long history. Dumbledore had done his absolute best to raise Harry with love while simultaneously preparing him for the destiny awaiting, had taught him magic and morality in equal measure, had given him knowledge while trying desperately to preserve innocence and childhood wonder, had loved him genuinely while knowing that love might eventually require terrible sacrifice. Whether he'd succeeded would depend entirely on what came next, on the challenges Harry would face and how he'd respond to them. First year, an unusual student experience. September 1st, 1991, the Hogwarts Express departed King's Cross Station carrying excited students toward the castle, but Harry Potter wasn't on it. He was already at Hogwarts, had lived there his entire life, was watching from a tower window as the Scarlet steam engine approached Hogsmeade Station in the distance, bringing his future classmates. This created immediate and significant complications for the traditional Hogwarts student experience that every witch and wizard treasured. The boat ride across the Black Lake with Hagrid, the first breathtaking view of the castle illuminated against the night sky with all its windows glowing, the profound sense of arriving somewhere truly magical and new and full of possibility. Harry would never have those experiences, those precious first moments, He'd seen the castle every single day for 10 years, knew it better than most professors. But Dumbledore had arranged something special to compensate for what Harry had missed. Harry would attend the sorting ceremony as if he were arriving normally, with the other first years. Would experience that traditional moment of house selection in front of the entire school. Would join his house table for the welcoming feast. It wouldn't be the same as arriving with peers on the train, forming those first tentative friendships, but it was something meaningful. A way to mark his transition from ward to student. The Great Hall filled gradually with students returning from summer holiday. The nervous and excited first years assembled at the front in a tight group. Harry joined them, trying hard to look appropriately awed by surroundings he knew more intimately than his own hands, trying to see the castle through fresh eyes. He caught Dumbledore's eye at the staff table and received a slight smile of encouragement and pride. Minerva McGonagall brought out the sorting hat ceremoniously, placing it on the traditional stool. Harry knew the hat well, had talked to it occasionally when Dumbledore brought it out of storage for cleaning or repairs, had heard its songs from previous years, but he'd never been formally sorted himself, never had it judge his character and potential. When McGonagall called Potter Harry, the entire hall erupted in excited whispers and pointing. Harry Potter, the boy who lived, the child who defeated you-know-who as a baby. Everyone stared intently as he walked to the stool and sat, the hat descending over his eyes. The hat spoke silently into his mind, its voice old and thoughtful. Ah, Harry Potter, I've been waiting for this particular moment for 10 years. You're a genuinely complex one, more so than most students I've sorted. Brilliant mind, worthy of Ravenclaw without question. Brave heart, suitable for Gryffindor like your parents. Ambitious in your pursuit of knowledge and excellence. Touching Slytherin. Loyal to those you love. Showing Hufflepuff qualities. Where shall I put you? Where do I actually belong? Harry asked silently, genuinely uncertain. Where do you want to belong? The hat countered. Harry thought carefully about his parents, both proud Gryffindors, both brave and noble. Thought about proving he was more than just the boy who lived, more than Dumbledore's ward and special project. Thought about finding himself rather than simply living up to others' expectations of who he should be. Somewhere I can be myself, Harry answered honestly. Not my parents' son or Dumbledore's student, but just me. Interesting answer, the hat mused. Very interesting indeed. You had your father's courage and your mother's intelligence, but you've also developed something unique through your unusual upbringing. Then it had better be Ravenclaw. The announcement surprised absolutely everyone in the hall, including Harry himself. He'd assumed Gryffindor, like his parents, had prepared himself for that house and its expectations. But as he walked to the Ravenclaw table and was greeted with enthusiastic applause and cheering, he felt something settle properly inside him. This was right. Ravenclaw valued knowledge and wisdom and creativity, qualities Dumbledore had carefully cultivated in him throughout his childhood. The Ravenclaw first years welcomed him warmly but cautiously, uncertain how to treat someone so famous. They knew he was special. Everyone in the magical world knew that. But they were also Ravenclaws, valuing cleverness and genuine merit over blind hero worship or celebrity status. One girl with bushy brown hair and an intense, intelligent expression extended her hand formally across the table. Hermione Granger, I've read about you extensively, of course. Every book about modern magical history mentions you. Your survival of the Killing Curse suggests unique magical properties that should be seriously studied and understood. Harry shook her hand, genuinely amused by her directness. I'd really rather not be studied like an experimental subject in a laboratory. Of course not, I didn't mean it like that, Hermione said quickly, blushing. But you must be curious about the magical mechanics yourself? About how and why you survived? Very curious, Harry admitted. Want to research it together sometime? I have access to Dumbledore's private library. Hermione's face lit up with pure delight. Absolutely, that would be wonderful. Harry had found his first real peer friend, someone close to his own age, someone who valued knowledge like he did, but hadn't grown up isolated in a castle with only adults for company. Someone who could teach him how to be a normal student while he could share his extensive magical knowledge. Classes began the next morning, and Harry immediately faced the challenge he'd anticipated and dreaded. He already knew most of the first-year curriculum thoroughly and in detail. Dumbledore had taught him well beyond the standard first-year material over the past several years. But he tried to engage authentically anyway, to let professors teach him and his classmates rather than showing off his advanced knowledge inappropriately. Flitwick's charms class was easiest to navigate. The professor knew Harry's actual skill level from years of teaching him privately and gave him appropriately advanced assignments while teaching the basics to other students. He'd pull Harry aside with extra reading or more complex spells to practice, keeping him challenged while not making the other students feel inadequate. Transfiguration was harder because McGonagall was torn between pride in Harry's exceptional ability. He could already perform transformations most third years struggled with, and frustration that he wasn't being properly challenged by the standard curriculum. She eventually started giving him separate assignments as well, though she tried to be subtle about it. Potions was a complete disaster from the very first lesson. Snape had never been comfortable with Harry, seeing too much of Lily Evans in him while simultaneously resenting James Potter's features and mannerisms. Having Harry in his classroom clearly advanced far beyond first-year work, and sitting there looking like James while having Lily's eyes triggered all of Snape's complicated, unresolved feelings about the past. "Mr. Potter," Snape said during the first class, his voice dripping with barely controlled hostility. "Perhaps you believe your fame and privileged relationship with the headmaster excuse you from following basic instruction, like the other students." "No, sir," Harry said carefully, recognizing danger in Snape's tone and expression. "I'm here to learn like everyone else." "Then perhaps you can tell the class what would result from adding powdered asphodel to an infusion of wormwood," Snape challenged. Harry knew the answer immediately. He'd studied potions extensively. But he recognized the trap clearly. Snape was testing whether he'd show off his knowledge or display appropriate humility. "The draught of living death, sir. But I'd prefer to learn the practical brewing techniques rather than just reciting theory I've read in books." Snape's expression flickered with something like surprise before returning to his characteristic scowl. 5 points from Ravenclaw for cheek and inappropriate familiarity. Get to work on the simple cure for boils like everyone else. It wasn't fair, but Harry understood the situation. Snape was dealing with his own trauma and complicated grief, and Harry was an uncomfortable reminder of people and events Snape would rather forget. Better to accept unfair treatment stoically than create additional conflict that would make everything worse. The Halloween incident with the troll happened differently in this timeline, due to Harry's advanced abilities and knowledge. Harry was in the library researching advanced transfiguration theory when he heard screaming echoing through the corridors. He ran toward the sound without hesitation and found Hermione Granger cornered by a massive 12-foot mountain troll in the girls' bathroom. The creature's club raised to strike. His response was instinctive and drew on years of advanced training. He conjured thick ropes to entangle the troll's legs, then hit it with a powerful stunning spell, far beyond anything in the first-year curriculum. When that didn't drop the creature immediately due to its magic-resistant hide, he levitated a heavy sink using precise transfiguration and dropped it with considerable force on the troll's head. The creature collapsed unconscious with a ground-shaking thud. Hermione stared at him with a mixture of awe, terror, and confusion. "How did you do that?" she asked shakily. "Those spells are years beyond first-year work. I've read the entire first-year curriculum, and none of that was in it." "I've had extensive training," Harry admitted, helping her stand. "Are you hurt?" McGonagall arrived moments later, followed quickly by Snape and Quirrell. She took in the scene. Unconscious troll, unharmed Hermione, Harry standing with wand drawn and looking remarkably calm for an 11-year-old who just faced a mountain troll. "Potter, my office." Immediately. "Miss Granger, go to the hospital wing to be checked for injuries." In McGonagall's office, she confronted him seriously. "You could have been killed, Harry. Why didn't you immediately get a professor instead of engaging a fully grown mountain troll alone?" "There wasn't time, Professor. Hermione was in immediate danger and I was the only person there who could help her. If I'd run for help, she might have been killed." "And where exactly did you learn magic capable of defeating a troll? Those weren't first-year spells." Harry met her eyes steadily. "From Dumbledore. And from you during our private lessons. And from Professor Flitwick. I'm sorry if I violated some rule about using advanced magic as a first-year student, but I won't apologize for saving Hermione's life when I had the ability to do so." McGonagall's stern expression softened slightly, pride mixing with concern. "You're absolutely right, of course. Your actions were brave and selfless." 10 points to Ravenclaw for exceptional courage in defending a fellow student. "But Harry, you must understand. Other students will resent your abilities if you display them too openly and frequently. They'll feel inadequate or think you're showing off. I know, Professor. I'm genuinely trying to be normal and fit in, but when someone's in real danger and I can help, then you do what's necessary to protect them, McGonagall finished. As your parents would have done without hesitation. They would be very proud of you today, Harry. As am I. The incident cemented Harry's friendship with Hermione permanently. She stopped seeing him as just the boy who lived, or the headmaster's ward, and started seeing him as an actual person, brilliant and kind and surprisingly humble despite his abilities. They studied together constantly, researched together in the library, challenged each other intellectually in ways both found stimulating, but the incident also significantly increased Harry's isolation from other students. Word spread rapidly through the school about Harry's advanced magic and his defeat of a mountain troll. Some students were impressed and admiring, others intimidated and resentful, many jealous of his obvious abilities and special relationship with the headmaster. Harry was already different from everyone else, and now everyone knew exactly how different he truly was. The Philosopher's Stone plot unfolded with Harry investigating more competently than in canon due to his resources and training. He noticed Professor Quirrell's suspicious behavior early, the nervous stammering that seemed slightly performative, the way he avoided direct contact with anyone, the faint dark magical signature Harry had been trained to recognize. He researched Nicholas Flamel without needing any hints, having heard Dumbledore mention his old friend in passing conversation. When he realized the stone was hidden at Hogwarts and someone, likely Quirrell, was trying to steal it, he went straight to Dumbledore rather than investigating alone. I believe Professor Quirrell is attempting to steal the Philosopher's Stone, Harry explained in Dumbledore's office. And I think he's possessed by Voldemort's spirit. The magical signature around him feels wrong, dark. Dumbledore looked at him carefully, impressed despite himself. That's a very serious accusation, Harry. What evidence do you have beyond instinct? Harry laid out his observations methodically. The suspicious behavior patterns, the magical signature he'd learned to recognize from Dumbledore's lessons on dark magic, the way Quirrell avoided all direct contact with others as if his skin couldn't touch anyone. It was more careful analysis than random investigation, the product of years learning to think strategically from Dumbledore himself. You're completely correct, Dumbledore admitted. I've been monitoring Quirrell carefully, waiting to see how far Voldemort would go and what methods he'd use. But I did not expect you to deduce this so quickly and thoroughly. You've learned well. Should I have kept silent instead of coming to you? Harry asked, genuinely uncertain about protocol. No, you did exactly right, but this presents certain complications I need you to understand. The stone is bait, carefully designed to draw out whoever might be serving Voldemort. If I act against Quirrell now, we lose the opportunity to confirm Voldemort's methods and identify his supporters. Do you understand what I'm saying? Harry felt a chill run down his spine. You're using the stone as a trap, and you were willing to let me investigate, possibly put myself in danger, to help spring it and gather information. Dumbledore's expression became pained, regret clear in his eyes. I would have protected you, would never have let you come to real harm. But yes, I was using the situation strategically, using both the stone and the potential threat to you as tools. I'm sorry, Harry. This is the burden of leadership. Sometimes we must use situations and even people to achieve necessary goals for the greater good. It was Harry's first real glimpse behind the curtain at Dumbledore's manipulative side. The uncomfortable realization that the man who'd raised him with genuine love was also a brilliant strategist who used people as chess pieces, who calculated risks and benefits with cold logic beneath the warm grandfatherly exterior. It hurt, but it was also oddly educational in a disturbing way. This was who Dumbledore truly was, simultaneously loving and strategic, protecting and manipulating in equal measure, caring deeply while using people to achieve his goals. What happens now? Harry asked quietly. Now we wait for Quirrell to make his move against the stone's protections, and we end this threat. But you will not be involved directly in the confrontation. That is not negotiable, Harry. I won't risk you. Harry accepted it because he understood the logic, even if he didn't entirely like being protected. But he also began watching Dumbledore differently from that conversation forward, seeing the multiple layers beneath the kind grandfatherly facade, understanding that he'd been raised by someone far more complex and morally ambiguous than he'd realized as a young child. When Quirrell did make his attempt to steal the stone, Dumbledore was waiting and prepared. The confrontation happened without Harry's direct involvement, though he watched from a safe distance using methods Dumbledore had taught him. Quirrell was captured. Voldemort's spirit fled screaming into the night, and the stone was subsequently destroyed to prevent future attempts. The immediate threat ended, but Harry had learned important, uncomfortable lessons that would shape how he viewed the world. That Dumbledore loved him genuinely but would still use him strategically when necessary. That growing up as the headmaster's ward meant understanding the difference between personal affection and tactical decisions made for larger purposes. That he needed to develop his own independent judgment and moral compass rather than just trusting Dumbledore's completely. First year ended successfully in terms of Harry's safety and education, but with his eyes significantly more open to uncomfortable realities. He was brilliant and advanced and genuinely loved, but he was also clearly being groomed for something larger, shaped deliberately for a purpose Dumbledore hadn't fully revealed yet. The question moving forward was whether Harry would passively accept that shaping or begin to actively resist and question it. Second year, the Chamber of Secrets crisis. Second year brought the Chamber of Secrets crisis, and new, deeper understanding of how fundamentally different Harry's experience was from that of normal students. When the mysterious attack started and students were systematically petrified by an unknown creature, Harry investigated with resources and knowledge that normal 12-year-old students simply didn't possess. He had unlimited access to Dumbledore's extensive private library containing thousands of rare books, the accumulated knowledge of the headmaster himself, and a decade of experience learning Hogwarts' deepest secrets from the people who knew them best. He figured out the basilisk significantly faster than Canon Harry would have, recognized the distinctive symptoms of basilisk-induced petrification from his extensive reading, researched effective ways to kill the creature using ancient texts. When Ginny Weasley was taken into the chamber, Harry went to Dumbledore immediately with his complete findings rather than rushing in alone recklessly. The Chamber of Secrets contains a basilisk controlled through Parseltongue, Harry explained methodically in Dumbledore's office, laying out his evidence. Someone with access to Slytherin's monster is using it to petrify students systematically. Given the timing, the specific targets being mostly Muggle-borns, and the magical signature, I believe Voldemort is somehow involved, despite being disembodied. Dumbledore listened gravely, fingers stippled. You've deduced correctly and thoroughly. I've been investigating similar lines of inquiry independently. But how do you propose we proceed? What would you do if you were in my position? The basilisk must be destroyed. It's too dangerous to leave alive. And we need to find out how Voldemort is exerting influence from beyond death. I assume you have theories about the mechanism? I do, Dumbledore confirmed. Dark artifacts capable of preserving memory and personality, methods of anchoring the soul. But proving my theories requires catching the perpetrator in the act of using such an artifact. Harry felt that now familiar chill of recognition. You're waiting for someone else to be attacked, using students as bait to draw out the perpetrator and confirm the method. I'm monitoring the situation very carefully, Dumbledore said. No one will die. I've taken precautions. But yes, I need to understand Voldemort's method completely before I can counter it effectively and ensure it cannot be repeated. When Ginny Weasley was taken into the chamber itself, her life draining to feed Tom Riddle's memory, Harry insisted on being involved in the rescue mission despite Dumbledore's immediate protests and concerns about safety. They compromised after intense discussion. Harry would accompany Dumbledore, but stay behind him at all times, observe the situation but not engage directly unless absolutely necessary for survival. It was more involvement than Dumbledore wanted but less than Harry demanded. The chamber was exactly as Harry had imagined from his extensive research in ancient texts. Massive, ancient, filled with serpent imagery and Parseltongue engravings. The basilisk was enormous and deadly when it emerged, easily 60 feet long. But Dumbledore was thoroughly prepared, immediately summoning Fawkes, who blinded the creature with his talons. Dumbledore killed it efficiently with the sword of Gryffindor that Fawkes had brought, then carefully destroyed Tom Riddle's diary after extracting crucial information through careful questioning. This is a Horcrux, Dumbledore explained to Harry afterward in his office, the destroyed diary smoking slightly on the desk between them. A fragment of Voldemort's soul preserved in an object through the darkest magic imaginable. Murder used to split the soul. You knew he'd made them, Harry stated rather than asked. I suspected strongly based on his apparent immortality and magical signature. This confirms it beyond doubt, and it means Voldemort is not truly dead, merely disembodied and weakened. He will return eventually when he finds a way. Harry absorbed this disturbing information with 12-year-old seriousness, processing implications. How many Horcruxes do you think he made? That's what we must determine through research and investigation. But Harry, this knowledge is dangerous in multiple ways. You understand why I'm telling you, despite your age. Because knowing Voldemort will return means I have to prepare to face him eventually, Harry said quietly. The prophecy you've never fully told me about probably says as much, doesn't it? Dumbledore went very still, his expression carefully controlled. How did you know about the prophecy? I've lived in this castle for 12 years, Harry explained. I've overheard things in conversations people thought were private, pieced together others from context and research. You've been preparing me for something my entire life. The training, the advanced magic, the lessons about Voldemort. It's not hard to deduce that my connection to Voldemort is more than just surviving the killing curse as a baby. For a long moment, Dumbledore said nothing, weighing his words carefully. Then he sighed deeply, looking older than his many years. You're right, of course. There is a prophecy made before you were born. It suggests that neither you nor Voldemort can live while the other survives. One must die for the other to truly live. I've been preparing you, because I knew someday you would need to face him in final confrontation. And you were going to tell me about this when exactly? When you were old enough to handle the burden without it crushing you, Dumbledore said gently. Apparently you're more ready than I realized. You've grown up faster than I hoped you would. They talked for hours that night, Dumbledore finally being fully honest. He revealed the complete prophecy and its exact wording, explained his theories about Horcruxes and how many Voldemort might have created, outlined his preliminary plans for eventually hunting them down systematically. Harry listened carefully and understood with growing clarity that his entire childhood had been deliberately shaped by this knowledge. Dumbledore had raised him with genuine love, yes, but also with calculated purpose. Every lesson had been preparation. Every skill taught had been a tool for the eventual war. Are you angry with me? Dumbledore asked. I don't know, Harry answered honestly. You've given me everything I could want. Education, love, a home, knowledge. But it was all in service of making me capable of killing Voldemort someday. Does that make the love less real? Does it make me just a weapon you're crafting? The love is completely real, Dumbledore said firmly. The purpose is also real. I wish desperately that I could give you a normal childhood, without destiny hanging over it like a sword. But I cannot change what is sowing, cannot alter prophecy or undo Voldemort's actions. I can only prepare you as best I can while loving you as much as I'm able. Then we work together from now on, Harry decided. You stop trying to manipulate me into readiness, and just be completely honest about what's coming and what we need to do. I'll prepare willingly if you trust me with the full truth instead of parceling it out when you think I'm ready. It was a significant turning point in their relationship, a fundamental shift in the power dynamic. Dumbledore agreed to more complete honesty, and Harry consciously accepted his role in the coming conflict. They became more like partners in some ways, even though the relationship remained inherently unequal due to age and experience. Years 3 and 4, growing complexity. Third year passed relatively quietly compared to the intense drama of previous years. No major crisis immediately threatened the school, just Harry steadily advancing through magical education faster than any of his peers. He took his OWLs at age 13 and passed with outstanding grades in absolutely everything. Began studying Newt-level subjects, while technically still a third-year student, working with professors on advanced magic usually reserved for 17-year-olds. Socially, he remained somewhat isolated but less desperately lonely than before. Hermione was his closest friend, the only peer who could truly match him intellectually and challenge him. Luna Lovegood became another friend. Her unusual perspective and complete lack of intimidation by his fame or abilities made her easy, comfortable company. Neville Longbottom appreciated Harry's patient tutoring in subjects he struggled with, and they bonded over discussions of herbology. But Harry never had truly normal teenage experiences, despite his best efforts. Never went on Hogsmeade weekends, because he could visit the village anytime with Dumbledore's permission. Never pulled elaborate pranks because he respected the castle and professors too much. Never rebelled against authority in typical adolescent ways because Dumbledore was his guardian and father figure, not just his headmaster. He existed in a strange liminal space between child and adult, student and teacher, never quite fitting anywhere completely. Remus Lupin's year teaching Defense Against the Dark Arts was emotionally complicated for everyone involved. Lupin had known James and Lily well, had been one of their closest friends, and seeing Harry, so physically similar to James but with Lily's distinctive brilliant eyes, was initially painful. But he was also genuinely amazed by Harry's exceptional abilities and deep magical knowledge. Your father would be so incredibly proud of you, Lupin said one day, after Harry successfully cast a corporeal Patronus at age 13. A stag, like James's Animagus form. And probably terrified. You're far more advanced than he was at your age, than any of us were. Dumbledore's been teaching me directly since I could hold a wand, Harry explained. That's both a tremendous gift and a heavy burden, isn't it? Lupin observed perceptively. Harry appreciated that Lupin understood the duality without needing extensive explanation. Yes? Exactly. I'm grateful for the knowledge and abilities. But sometimes I desperately wish I could just be normal like everyone else. Normal is vastly overrated, Lupin said with a slight smile. Especially for someone with your particular destiny ahead. The Sirius Black situation was handled very differently in this timeline. When Dumbledore learned through careful investigation that Sirius was actually innocent and Peter Pettigrew was alive, he acted immediately rather than letting events unfold, used his considerable authority and political influence to grant Sirius a proper trial with Veritaserum, publicly exposed Pettigrew's betrayal and crimes, cleared Sirius's name completely. Harry gained a godfather, someone who'd known his parents intimately and could tell him personal stories Dumbledore couldn't. Sirius was absolutely amazed by Harry's abilities and knowledge. You're brilliant, Harry, Sirius said during their first real private conversation after his exoneration. James would be so proud of everything you've accomplished. Lily too. But mate, you're also way too serious and adult for a 13-year-old. You need to have some actual fun. Be a bit reckless sometimes. I don't really know how to do that, Harry admitted. Then I'll teach you, Sirius declared. Someone needs to balance out Dumbledore's influence and get you to actually enjoy being young. You're only 13 once. Sirius became a regular presence at Hogwarts, teaching Harry to prank occasionally and laugh freely and be appropriately reckless in safe ways. It was exactly what Harry needed. Someone who loved him but wasn't trying to prepare him for war, who just wanted him to be happy and young. Fourth year brought the Triwizard Tournament, and massive disruption to Harry's carefully structured life. When his name came out of the Goblet of Fire despite his being underage and not entering, his first reaction was anger rather than fear. Fury at whoever had entered him without permission or consent. Who did this? Harry demanded in Dumbledore's office immediately after the selection. Who put my name in? I don't know yet, Dumbledore admitted, but we will find out. This is clearly a plot. The tournament proceeded with Harry participating under official protest and Dumbledore's investigation. He prepared meticulously for each task, using knowledge well beyond what normal 14-year-old students possessed. The dragon task was almost easy. He'd studied dragon behavior extensively with Hagrid over years. The lake task was harder but manageable with advanced transfiguration and water-breathing techniques. The maze was where everything went catastrophically wrong. Harry reached the Triwizard Cup first, through skill and knowledge, touched it as instructed, and was instantly transported to the graveyard where Voldemort and his followers waited. But this Harry was fundamentally different from canon. When Voldemort rose from the cauldron reborn, when Peter Pettigrew bound Harry for the resurrection ritual, Harry didn't panic or freeze. He assessed the situation strategically and tactically, the way Dumbledore had trained him to do since childhood. "Hello, Tom," Harry said calmly, despite his fear. Voldemort's red eyes narrowed dangerously. "You dare speak my name, boy? You dare address the Dark Lord with such disrespect?" "Why not?" Harry replied, channeling Dumbledore's lessons about psychological warfare. "You're just a wizard who split his soul into pieces to avoid death. That's pitiable, not terrifying." The calculated psychological warfare was deliberate. Harry knew with certainty he couldn't win a direct magical duel against the fully resurrected Dark Lord, but he could unsettle Voldemort, could use knowledge Voldemort didn't know he possessed to gain psychological advantage. "You know about the Horcruxes," Voldemort realized, genuine surprise in his voice. "Dumbledore and I have been hunting them," Harry said with more confidence than he felt. "You've made several, haven't you?" Classic megalomania. One piece of soul wasn't enough insurance against death for someone as paranoid as you. Voldemort's fury was palpable, his magic crackling in the air. He tortured Harry with Cruciatus, but Harry had been taught occlumency extensively, had practiced mental discipline and pain management. The agony was enormous, nearly unbearable, but he didn't break or scream as Voldemort wanted. When the duel finally came, their wands connected exactly as in canon, priori incantatem, creating the ghost echoes of Voldemort's victims. But Harry wasn't surprised or confused. Dumbledore had taught him extensively about twin cores, about wand lore and rare magical phenomena. about the deep magic connecting him and Voldemort. He used the distraction and the connection to escape with Cedric Diggory's body, portkeying back to Hogwarts using the cup. But he'd learned something crucial from the encounter. Voldemort was immensely powerful but not invincible. Knowledge and strategy could counter raw power. Preparation could overcome pure magical strength. The aftermath saw Minister Fudge stubbornly denying Voldemort's return despite the evidence, the Ministry turning against both Dumbledore and Harry publicly. But Harry handled it better than he would have in canon, having been essentially media-trained by Dumbledore, understanding politics and public perception and manipulation. "They'll believe eventually," Harry told Dumbledore calmly. "When Voldemort acts openly and can't be denied, we just have to be patient and prepare." "You're remarkably calm about facing disbelief and slander," Dumbledore observed. "You raised me to be ready for this," Harry pointed out. "To face Voldemort and everything that comes with it. I am ready." Dumbledore looked at him with pride mixed with deep sadness. "I wish you didn't have to be." Current word count. Approximately 19,200 words, continuing to reach 20,000 years 5 through 7. War, partnership, and victory. Fifth year brought Dolores Umbridge and the Ministry's active campaign against Dumbledore's authority. But this timeline diverged significantly from canon, because Harry's relationship with Dumbledore was fundamentally different. They weren't just headmaster and student. They were guardian and ward, mentor and protege, partners in a war against darkness. Attacking Dumbledore meant attacking Harry's family. When Umbridge began her systematic reforms, restricting defensive magic education and undermining Dumbledore's authority at every turn, Harry didn't secretly form Dumbledore's army in defiance. Instead, he approached Dumbledore directly with his concerns and a proposed solution. "She's deliberately leaving students unprepared for the war that's coming," Harry explained. "We need to do something." "I agree completely," Dumbledore said. "But direct confrontation with the Ministry would be counterproductive and could result in my removal. Then we work around her completely. I teach students defensive magic privately. You provide resources and protection from discovery, and we train an army while maintaining plausible deniability if discovered." Dumbledore smiled slightly at Harry's strategic thinking. "You've learned these lessons well." "Very well, we'll proceed carefully." The DA formed, but with Dumbledore's full knowledge and subtle support. Room of Requirement meetings continued as in canon, but Harry taught with significantly more advanced knowledge. He didn't just cover basic defensive spells, he taught actual combat magic, strategy, preparation for real war against dark wizards. Harry's occlumency lessons happened with Dumbledore rather than Snape, which changed everything. They were intimate sessions where Dumbledore and Harry deliberately shared their minds, their memories, their deepest secrets without the hostility that characterized Snape's teaching. Harry saw Dumbledore's complicated relationship with Grindelwald, the tragic death of Ariana, the crushing guilt and regret that drove him. Dumbledore saw Harry's loneliness growing up isolated, his resentment at being groomed for war, his genuine love for Dumbledore despite recognizing the manipulation. The Department of Mysteries incident happened differently due to Harry's training and partnership with Dumbledore. Harry's vision of Sirius being tortured didn't panic him into recklessness. He contacted Dumbledore immediately through their emergency communication system. "I had a vision of Sirius being tortured at the Department of Mysteries. It felt like Voldemort planted it deliberately." "Almost certainly he did," Dumbledore confirmed. "He's been trying to lure you there for months. The prophecy is stored there and only you or Voldemort can retrieve it. Then we spring the trap, but on our terms with full preparation." They planned carefully with the order. Harry went with backup, and the battle happened but with better coordination. Sirius survived because Harry had warned him it was likely a trap. Sixth year brought Horcrux hunting as an active mission rather than Dumbledore's solo quest. Harry insisted on being fully involved as an equal partner. "We're partners in this," Harry said firmly. "You don't get to protect me by excluding me from the most important work." They hunted together, retrieved the locket from the cave, both drinking the terrible potion. Found the cup at Gringotts through careful planning. The staged death on the astronomy tower was planned by all three, Dumbledore, Harry, and Snape working together. Seventh year saw Harry hunting Horcruxes with Dumbledore's secret guidance. The final battle came. Harry learned he was a Horcrux, but survived its destruction. The duel with Voldemort showcased 16 years of Dumbledore's training. Harry won. Voldemort died. The war ended. In the aftermath, Harry confronted his complicated feelings. You raised me with love while preparing me to die. You were the best and worst guardian possible. I know, Dumbledore said. I'm sorry for the worst parts, but I wouldn't change it. You gave me what I needed. What will you do now? Build a life that's mine.